On this episode of Entertainment Education, the podcast, the one with rivalry, we're not getting heated, but we discuss how rivalry can be healthy, unhealthy, and even violent. We discuss how interest in studying rivalry led our guests to creating the perspective files. And together, we examine why rivalries are so compelling and how they become part of personal and group identities, and the ways they foster community among fans. We tackle the darker side of competition, exploring when healthy rivalries cross the line and become toxic fandom. Join me in opening this season with a friend of the show, Dr. Cody Havard, fandom and rivalry scholar, and maybe, just a surprise little discussion from Inner Dialogue.
Health, Spanish. You're taking 12th grade calculus?
Yeah, I like math,
Ew, why?
because it's the same in every country.
It's beautiful.
Entertainment Education, the podcast, an 8-part series where host Alan Babiar's Lyra will take you through the journey of how entertainment can educate and create social change.
Oh, yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it.
Welcome back, my friends. We are back, season three, our biggest and best one yet of Entertainment Education, the podcast. I am your host, Alan Babiar's Lyra, and I come back to you again, like I said, for season three, as we discuss how the entertainment industry impacts an educational setting. Now, on today's episode, episode one of this season, we are chatting with somebody who is a friend of the show, a friend of mine, and somebody that I'm glad to bring back every season so far. Please welcome Cody Havard. Hello, Cody. How are you?
Good, Alan. How are you? And so everyone knows, the after every season, I message Alan saying what a great show it is, and I genuinely believe that. But I also say, are you going to do it again? And because I want to be on the show,
Well,
like I want to be on and get to talk about these things and get to talk to Alan. So I feel like with all of the listener feedback and calling for more episodes and more seasons, I join everybody in that because I think this is such a cool summer project that you do every year.
Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate that. Second of all, I am always glad to chat with you. We were supposed to start recording this episode like 15 minutes ago, but we just started just chatting and went on. And I'm like, oh, shoot, we need to record. But we appreciate you as always. Next season, though, I don't know. I'm just saying I may dump you and invite Inner Dialogue on. We'll see how that goes, though.
Because he causes a lot of trouble. He's
He
caused a lot of difficulty, so I'm not real sure. He would be excited, but we'll have to see. I was going to say, because this is entertainment education, the title is entertainment education, the podcast. We at the University of Memphis, we actually in the fall are transitioning from sport and leisure management to sport and entertainment management.
Really?
Um,
Tell me a little bit about that.
so there's my plug for being on the next 7 years, 7 seasons of entertainment education, the podcast. We're so for a long time we got our start in like most sport management programs, I think with like kind of with PE and things like that. And that's kind of where sport management as a discipline started, is people just thought that's kind of what it was and where it fit. And over the years, we left our first school or our first department of health education. And then we joined a hospitality school. Ironically, now the hospitality school and us are going back to like this new college of health and human sciences. And we're actually no longer going to be in the hospitality school. We're going to kind of be like a department or a unit within the larger college as well.
Hmm.
But over the last probably 5 or 6 years, we've been talking about how really sport is within the entertainment scope or under the entertainment umbrella. And one thing that I've been talking about in classes all the time, I've been telling people, don't think of yourselves as sport managers, think of yourselves as entertainment managers, because there are so many more opportunities to kind of get jobs and engage with customers and everything in entertainment, general entertainment. And so finally, we've kind of made that transition to where we are now going to be called sport and entertainment management. What we have to do now is we're kind of going through and looking at, all right, what is going to benefit our students the most? Like being in Memphis, and being around this area, what are the interests of students that are going to kind of benefit them the most? Is it going to be like, are we going to include themed entertainment? That's something I would really like to include. Are we going to include things like music entertainment and everything, like collaborate with other schools for things like that? Um, so we'll see over the next probably year or 2 years, kind of what more of the interest is. But yeah, we're officially, I think July 1 maybe is when it's official. We will be sport and entertainment management. So
Two follow-up questions to that. First, the marketing and the driving behind events, specifically sports events, is crazy. They are suggesting early on, the Super Bowl just happened, what, 2 months ago? And they're suggesting that next year's ads are going to be about averaging 10 mil for
mhm.
30 seconds. That is crazy. But these companies like Doritos and Pepsi and Coke, and they're all paying it, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, is do you guys see that impacting your program in any way, or looking at the business side of things that way?
Yeah, I mean that's basically what we are, is like the easy way to explain what sport management is we cover a lot of business concepts and business practices.
Hmm.
And we just use sport and now entertainment, or I've been using entertainment for a while, but we'll use sport and entertainment kind of as the examples. The coolest example to me of the influence of entertainment, or the kind of the convergence of general entertainment and sport. I remember being in school as an undergrad, like probably 2002 or 3, and one of my professors talking about how Super Bowl halftime shows will within the next 10 years will resemble Broadway shows.
Hmm.
They're like, you'll have a 15-minute Broadway production. And I've been saying that for a long time. And it took a long time, 2002 to 2026. So it took, over 20 years. But this last year, the halftime show was so awesome because it was a production. It was a true production. Yes, it's a concert, but it was a true production as far as like there was a story, beginning, middle, and end.
Hmm.
And so that was so cool to me. And what was the other thing that was so awesome is, if you're not Spanish speaking, um, you may not have understood what was being said during that show. However, you understood kind of the overall concept of it
Hmm.
and the story that was being told, which was really, really cool. And so, it started with, I mean, Bad Bunny did an amazing job last year. Disney is now, this is the first time in a while that the Super Bowl is going to be on ABC or Disney channels.
Hmm.
And I think this year Disney's going to have a lot to do with the Super Bowl. And I expect them to try to outdo what was done last year as far as, the Broadway production. And so actually in one of our classes, in my promotions class this last semester, we talked about, what are some ideas Disney could have for a Super Bowl halftime show? Is it bringing out characters? Because they've already, they're calling this the year of the Super Bowl, where
Mhm.
characters like Star Wars and Pixar and Marvel, they're all like converging to go watch the Super Bowl. And can you imagine if building off of the announcement that Taylor Swift has a song in Toy Story 5, can
Mhm.
you imagine if she were to be involved in a halftime show? That by itself would break every record for every halftime show. And so I think they're going to go big this year,
Oh yeah.
and it's just going to get bigger and bigger every year, or try to get bigger and bigger every year.
They're building a brand new stadium here in Nashville, and we just got the 2030. I think it's the
Hmm.
2030 Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They're going to host it here. And I know it's far away and we won't know for a while and everything, but Taylor is one of the names that they floated
Hmm.
already, and they're like, "Oh yeah, let's get Taylor into Nashville. That would be such an amazing, convergence together and everything." And I'm like, "Yeah." One thing before we kind of move on and jump in a little bit, now we saw this year again. I agree with you 1,000%. Bad Bunny was a beautiful love letter to Puerto Rico, and it told a beautiful story, is what it did. And we saw, I'm going to put this very delicately, but we saw a little bit of political angst and a second Super Bowl halftime show
Yeah.
come out in a different kind of streaming capacity. However, when I put my marketing hat on and I put my PR professor hat on, I think that is a brilliant idea to get two or three halftime shows competing against each other. You're now talking competing advertising. You're now talking competing networks. That's some great selling right there. I mean, we're not talking the statement behind this,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
they were. But I think in the future, that would be a moneymaker.
Well, and it's not so a separate halftime show. I'm not sure if that had happened before. However, during the game itself, I mean, you look at how big the Puppy Bowl is now
Hmm.
on Animal Planet, uh, and you look at, um, I don't they don't do it anymore, but they used to do the Bud Bowl. Remember the
Hmm.
where it would be like the cans of Bud and Bud Light,
Yes.
Budweiser, and everything playing. Um, and so you do have and so you definitely could, you had these examples of um these alternate games, if you will. And now with the introduction of alternate broadcasts, and by that I mean like 2 years ago, Nickelodeon actually had an alternate broadcast of the Super Bowl. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of your viewers have probably know or seen the alternate broadcast that Disney has done for like NHL games and NFL, NBA games. Um, I fully expect them to do one for the Super Bowl this year. And in the future, building off of your point, I could see, every other network that does not have the Super Bowl, it's almost like at least until, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they just almost gave up. They're like, we just
Hmm.
give up that day. Or we schedule things after it so we can run an ad about our new show that's coming on directly after the Super Bowl. So watch the Super Bowl and then switch over to our channel. You may see more competition and people trying to have kind of alternative broadcasts, and maybe halftime shows and things like that. Yeah, the political statement of the halftime show aside, it also didn't really do that well viewership wise.
Oh, definitely not.
Um, so that may be something that, and obviously like the political aspect of it could, like that contributed to that. Um, um, but that also may be something that people that are thinking about this may say, well, we do have one example of something being on at the same time, and it didn't do very well. Now, that doesn't mean people aren't going to try in the future, and people can definitely kind of produce things that have different messaging, if you will, that might be more welcoming to more viewers. I mean, um, because if Disney did something like that every year, where they had a Super Bowl halftime show with their animated characters on Disney Plus or Disney Channel, who whatever, I know a lot of people that would tune into that.
Hmm.
And you do, and then you do get into like uh, you have to pay $10 million for an ad during the Super Bowl. But hey, if you want to be in the around the Super Bowl halftime show, or you can't say Super Bowl, the big game halftime show,
Hmm.
on our network, well, maybe now you're paying a million or 2 million to do that instead of, you're saving a lot of money to do that. So
So
yeah, I mean, I
why
think that that's a good point.
so why do you think these rivalries, whether it be stations or networks or, organizations, companies, why do you think they're so appealing to audiences?
So I think that if you it takes people back to kind of, in a way, it takes people back to that primal urge.
Hmm.
If you look evolutionary, when when people were living in caves and people were hunters and gatherers and people having to protect against predators and things like that, and kind of different groups trying to take what was ours. I think that's where it starts. Like people um, they had to band together and they had to protect their own. And there are, I think that allows people now, we still have kind of that competitive nature or survival nature, if you will.
Hmm.
And it, in a way, allows people to experience those things in a much more safe, relaxed setting. You know what I mean? And there there are sayings and phrases that come from rivalry and from competition and the in group versus out group. I mean, you think about the term circling the wagons when somebody says, "Hey, we need to circle the wagons," and what they're meaning is, on a sports team, like, we need to focus on ourselves. Everybody's talking about us, or everyone's down on us. We need to support ourselves as a team. If it's in a business, it's the same thing, like maybe they're they need to quote unquote circle the wagons to come up with ideas and things like that, and not listen to the outside noise. And that really comes from, again, that kind of the very problematic stories of Western settlers having to literally circle the wagons to protect themselves against potential invaders or potential, like, and now I think people know more of the story, that that's not actually what was happening. However, that's the story that was being told for so long. And so statements like that or phrases like that have stuck around. So I think now, because we live such a safe, or comparatively safe, I should say, maybe,
Hmm.
and a privileged lifestyle, that like we're not out having to hunt and gather. We're not out having to protect against, animals that are trying to to kill us and take our homes and things like that. We are, I think, as humans, we still have this urge to compare ourselves to someone else.
Hmm.
And these rivalries, whether it's in sport, whether it is, if you like, Nike versus Adidas shoes, or you are a Samsung user versus an Apple user, if you prefer different movie genres or different theme parks or different musicians, it allows us to compare against other people. And what we want to do when we compare against other people is we always want to compare favorably to someone else, because tells that makes us feel better.
Hmm.
If we can favorably compare to someone else and say that, hey, well, in this situation, I am better off, or I perform better than this person, that makes us feel good as human beings. I think that goes a long way into that it's just that group dynamic, us versus them. And I mean, you see it everywhere now. And unfortunately, you're seeing it on the biggest stages now, where you have factions of people and groups of people that don't can no longer just disagree with each other. It's like they have to, demonize the
Mhm.
other person or derogate the other groups and things like that.
So I want to keep going on this. How does one, in your opinion, incorporate rivalry almost into their identity? And that's almost like you were saying, hey, this other team or other, my other arch nemesis is demonic. They're bad. They're the worst people in the world. Does that become my identity then?
Well, and I think if a person isn't careful, it can, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of your viewers or a lot of your listeners, they probably know, like, some of the historically, like if people are going to war, they would refer to the quote unquote enemy, which, it's just other people that are fighting for what they believe or being told to fight for what somebody believes. Um, but they would use terms like vermin and cockroach and
Hmm.
and dog and things like this, and they would use those terms like vermin and cockroach. They had to kind of stop using the word dog specifically because people really started enjoying having dogs for pets. But
Hmm.
vermin and cockroach and things, because it would be easier for somebody to try to do something bad to another human being if they didn't view them as a human being.
Hmm.
And so if you are not careful, a lot of the rhetoric used in rivalry competitions and to promote rivalries, if you're not careful, it can be very detrimental.
Hmm.
And so that's why, for a while we produced The Adventures of Sport Rivalry Man. And it was the superhero character because kids like superheroes. And it was a comic setting because kids like comics. And the goal was to kind of show the each story would be, there would be a protagonist and they would have to make a decision on how to react to someone else, whether it was somebody being online bullied because of a team they followed or because of a group they liked. One story was like a Texas fan driving home from the football game against Oklahoma and seeing an Oklahoma fan with a flat tire. And like Sport Rivalry Man kind of helps them make the decision to, you should stop and help this person. Like, change the flat tire. They're human beings and things like
Hmm.
that. Um, and so if you're not careful, it definitely can be negative to the person and the person's identity. I'll tell two hopefully quick stories, but they won't be. On a personal level, when I was in college, I went to the University of Texas and I was in the in group. And so the University of Oklahoma and Texas A&M University were, they were not people you cheered for. They were not people you associated with. And after maturing, having a family and maturing, and especially working on rivalry for my research and my career, a lot of that changed because you see that, well, no, these are just people trying to enjoy what they are doing. They just chose to go to a different school and they chose to do these different things. Now, if somebody never gets out of that setting, then that can be really, really negative and really, really bad for that person and also um for the groups that are and the products that are trying to promote that. One example is when we did a few studies where, looking at the promotion of rivalries, we exposed people to different logos of rivalries, and one of them would be like the red and blue rivalry, um, the red and blue friendly, and then one of them was 481 miles of hate because the teams we were using was actually the University of Memphis and the University of Cincinnati. And we had it in a different setting as well, where it was Middle Tennessee State University and Western Kentucky University. So that was called the 98 Miles of Hate, because that's actually the distance between the campuses.
Hmm.
Um, and one interesting thing is I actually learned that Middle Tennessee State and Western Kentucky, they started using the name 98 Miles of Hate to describe their rivalry. Now, I
Hmm.
don't think that has anything to do with our study, but like it's just kind of a coincidence. But what was interesting is we found, first off, when we were comparing, it didn't really make sense to use the word friendly because people in the United States didn't really get what that meant. Like in international football or soccer, people get that, but not when you're talking about college sport in the United States. And um, but when we would compare people that saw the logo using the word rivalry versus people who saw the logo using the word hate, the people who saw the logo with the word hate in it, they didn't necessarily exhibit more feelings of rivalry like on the field or in the playing aspect. What they did is they were more distrustful of the outgroup,
Hmm.
which could lead to they could lead to bad things.
Hmm.
In another study, we actually had three stories, three mediated messages that people read and about an upcoming rivalry game. And one of them was just kind of the normal game preview, where are they playing, who's on the team, things like that. One of them was a story about the team's players and fans getting in a fight with each other leading up to the game. And then the third one was how the two teams and fan groups had a joint food drive together
Hmm.
to get ready for the rivalry game. So again, when we compared the people who read the story about the food drive and the people who read the story about the fight,
Hmm.
there were significant differences there. And in particular, the people who read the story about the fight, they were then asked like kind of their views of the rival team, but they were also asked their views of the favorite team brand. And for those people, the most interesting outcome of that or finding from that was the people who saw the title, or I'm sorry, saw the story about the fight,
Hmm.
they were less, they had more negative views of the rival group, but they also had more negative views of the favorite group as well. So when something like that happens and these negative stories come out, um, then you can actually hurt your own brand as
Hmm.
well because you're associated and you're involved in that event. And so promoters, marketers have to be really, really careful because it can become part of a person's identity. And if you don't get out of that setting, then it can lead just to some more negative experiences for you and for others. And as marketers, we have to do our job in how we advertise and how we promote that as well. So we kind of avoid those more negative aspects of competition and of rivalry.
Hmm. You mentioned a little bit about your research and things that have stemmed from that. Let's back up just a little bit. If you're watching us, our audience can see some interesting photos behind you. So, how has rivalry, what did your passion start with this? How did it become part of your career, and how did it become part of the things that we're looking at behind you?
So, this is another try to be a short answer, but it'll be a long answer. When I said I went to the University of Texas at Austin. I'm a Longhorn fan. When I was in my first year in my doctoral program, it was 2008. Texas had beaten Oklahoma in football and then lost to Texas Tech later in the season. So at the end of the season, this is when all three teams were still in the Big 12. Excuse me, there was a three-way tie for the Big 12 South title. And they actually had to go like three or four tiebreakers down the line to see who was going to represent the Big 12 South in the Big 12 championship game. And it ended up being Oklahoma based on, I think Oklahoma was ahead of Texas by like 2/10 or 2/100 of a point in the BCS rankings or something really, really crazy. So Oklahoma wins the Big 12 title game. They go on and they play Florida in the national championship. I'm watching the national championship game, and it starts to dawn on me that like I want Florida to win the national championship. And other than, Walt Disney World being located in Florida, I really don't have connections to the state of Florida.
Hmm.
It really was, I just don't want Oklahoma to win. And why don't I want Oklahoma to win? Well, it's because Texas beat Oklahoma, but if Oklahoma's a champion, then they have something over us.
Hmm.
And so then I started to think like, okay, I can't be the only person who's thinking this. I hope I'm not the only person who thinks this way because it is kind of, it is kind of weird to like have that much kind of distrust or for another group. And so that's what started me down the path of researching what people thought of their favorite teams and of the rival teams. And that's where Glory Out of Reflective Failure came from, where people are their likelihood to celebrate when their rival team is unsuccessful or fail in an indirect setting. So if they're playing someone else other than the favorite team, or if we're talking about like in a business setting, if a competing or rival company gets bad news or has a bad product launch or things like that, like people will celebrate that in an indirect setting. It also led to the sport rivalry fan perception scale,
Hmm.
which was looking at how people feel or perceive their rival in four different settings. The fan behavior of rival teams, support of the rival team, the satisfaction they get when they beat the rival team, and then the prestige of the rival team. That later kind of transitioned into the rivalry perception scale because we started doing research outside of sports. So we started comparing sport to like how Disney fans feel about going to a Disney park and a Universal park, how Marvel fans feel toward Marvel and DC, or people feel about Apple and Samsung, Star Wars and Star Trek. We even did Republicans versus Democrats, and we did within religion. And from that kind of then evolved into uh, that led to the first rivalry books that I edited a rivalry book, but then I wrote three others that were kind of for for a this Palgrave pivot that's behind me. That's the first one. If people see that, and those are kind of shorter books that they're still academic books, but they're shorter for people to be able to read. The one over my that I'm pointing to right now, that's just rivalry, how it impacts fans, organizations, and managers. That was kind of um, it's a student book for classes that's pretty easy to read. It's on, it's not on a real high academic level. People just kind of the non-academics can read it and hopefully get things out of that as well. And it's just kind of an overview of what rivalry is. But at the same time, I was getting more into my fandom of Disney. And so that's where you see like being a fan of Disney, the podcast, and then it led to being a fan of Disney, the book, talking about my Disney fandom,
Hmm.
but also what I was doing with Rivalry, because I was using like theme park fandom and then different settings with just in entertainment and different fan or group settings. I came up with I finally had gotten to a point where I did 12 different settings. Sport versus, like I said, like theme parks, athletic shoes, cell phones, entertainment options, things like that, streaming services. And we were able to compare all of those settings to determine how what settings influenced the most positive views of an outgroup and the most negative views
Hmm.
of an outgroup. And so through that, like we came up with a group composite, which is basically, it was just, that's the metric that we were able to use to compare all of this. And we came up with the hierarchy of outgroup derogation that shows of the 12 settings. What are the top three on down? And then we added a spectrum, an outgroup derogation spectrum, just to kind of have more of a visual of that. And so the three settings that elicited or influenced the most negativity in order were religion, then politics, and then sport. And sport was actually a lot lower than politics and religion. Um, so those three settings, and I don't think it's surprising to people, they tend to influence the most negativity toward outgroups. So if
Mm-hmm.
you are in one group, your views of the other group are more negative in those settings. The settings that elicited or influenced the most positive views, and actually in three of them were positive views, or two of them were positive views. The other was neutral. Theme parks, Disney theme parks versus Universal theme parks.
Mm-hmm.
The comic setting, Marvel versus DC. The science fiction setting, Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, with comics and science fiction, those were actually positive. So they were below the kind of the median point or the middle point of the scale that we use. So it showed that they actually did elicit or influence positive views of the outgroup, which makes sense because if you are a fan of comics or you're a fan of uh, science fiction or you're a fan of theme parks, a lot of people you have your preferred brands. However, you are part of a larger in group with anybody who is a fan of comics or science fiction or theme parks because people tend to, especially as we get older, people tend
Mm-hmm.
to look at adults as, hey, should you really be reading comics? Like, should you like Star Wars or Star Trek as much as you do? Like, oh, you're a Disney adult? Is there something wrong with you? Like Disney's for kids and things like that. So you kind of create this larger in group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that shows up. There's a chapter of that in Being a Fan of Disney, the book. And so that was kind of my first step into being more creative and less straight research.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other books I've written have a lot of, they're research heavy. They have a lot of research in them. Like I said, the rivalry book for classes that's written on with not as much research focus, but it still does incorporate all the research in there. The next thing that I wanted to do and what I'm trying to do now is reach readers and consumers in a different way that isn't so research heavy or research focused. And that's where the perspectives files comes from. That is my attempt to tell a narrative story that incorporates some of the research that I've done, some of the research other people have done, without, kind of calling out that it's actual research. Um, on group behavior and on fandom and on how we behave because based on the groups that we're in. And so basically, like the Prospectus Files is a story of two teenagers that they realize they are part of, they're being recruited to an organization that has been around like since the beginning of time to monitor people's decisions
Mm-hmm.
and help people make or learn from the decisions that people make. And some of them for the better of society, some of them not for the better of society. And so it starts out, it's a typical 3 act story where the characters are introduced, and then you kind of like build up to their training and they go on they meet certain people, they meet other characters in the book that they work for this organization called Shared Perspectives, which is actually the website that I have, sharedperspectives.org. So it tries to incorporate all of that. The people that they meet in the book actually came from the podcast. So people that have been on Being a Fan of Disney, the podcast, a few times, like a lot of those people are in the book. And for any listeners and any fans of Alan, the follow-up book to the Prospectus Files, Alan is going to play a vital role in that book, and his role as a communication expert and a professor will play a vital role in that. So, but and then they go to different rivalry settings, so they learn a little of the history of like the Hatfield and McCoy rivalry. They visit 1960 Rome during the Olympics.
Hmm.
And they learn a story about how the U.S. and USSR were competing over. They were using the Olympics to compete over like market superiority and perception and things like that. They visit when Adidas and Puma, and kind of learn the story of how that sort of divided the town of Herzogenaurach, Germany, because those two companies, they were started by brothers, and the brothers used to have one company, and then because of disagreements, nobody really knows what the disagreements are. Although the most popular story is during a bombing raid, the two families were sharing a bomb shelter, and one family was already in the shelter. The other one, when they came in, cursed at the people that were dropping the bombs. But the family that was already in the shelter thought they were cursing at them. And so that's kind of one of the most famous stories of as what started this feud. But that's what started Adidas, because it's the person's name who started that. His name was Adolf Dassler. So he went by Audi. He used that as his company name. And then his brother started Puma. The kids also learn about uh, the rivalry between Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova. And then they are learning about how Disney is trying to improve Disneyland to compete with or stay in front of what is going to happen at Universal Studios when Universal City started Universal Studios. They're trying to kind of stay ahead of that, and that's when everything goes wrong. And then the rest of the book, they find out like people are trying to change historical events, and so they go back into historical events and they're trying to change things. And as you can see on the title for people watching, that is the 1964 New York World's Fair. That's where the final kind of chase scene happens. And so if people are interested in kind of the adventure reading, hopefully they like it. It's technically, I just got it into our public library where I live, and they put it in the young adult section. So I guess it's a young adult book.
Mhm.
They made the call on that, which was very helpful. Um, and if anybody's fans of Disney, there's a heavy dose of Disney kind of history in there and Disney stories. I also, because of that, have kind of written short stories about different characters in the book. So one of the characters is a person named Stan, who is a really big fan of the Olympics. And so his short story, he has to go and he has to help save the Wally Bogue at the 1960 Winter Games when Disney was in charge of pageantry there. Another person that I'm working on their story now is a Disney historian. So she has to go and save a part of Disney history and the famous story of the Snow White statues in Disneyland and kind of the backstory of that. One of the main characters' name is Jules. Her name is Jules, so it's named after Jules Verne. So her story, she actually has to go and she has to help Jules Verne kind of with his writer's block in producing what later became the famous story of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so these are ways for me to be more creative and try to kind of get into that creative space myself, but also hopefully use that narrative form and maybe a form of edutainment
Mhm.
um, to kind of expose people to more research or more findings or more general knowledge about what causes people to feel different ways. And the reason it's called the perspectives files is because we all have our own perspectives on things.
Mhm.
And perspectives are what form kind of our attitudes and our behaviors toward people. And so, if based on how we react to something or how we view something, that influences a lot of what we do and a lot of the way that we treat other people.
Mhm. Well, I told you when you asked me if I would help you out a little bit, I told you I would gladly give you my perspective on that. You
Very
like
nice.
that? You like that? I want to put a pin on one of the things that you mentioned in there about the books. It is an actual true thing. Let's look a little bit before we leave at like the Disney Universal Parks uh bridge, if you want to call it that, or rivalry, we'll say. Last year we got the opening of Epic Universe, Super Mario Land in California. They are building a Cars related land in Florida. We're getting a Coco ride in California. Do you think that these two organizations are just trying to, at this point, top each other off, or are they actually going for quality rides and storytelling?
So what's so awesome about the rivalry between Universal and Disney um, is the theme park rivalry has ultimately led to better opportunity or better experiences for the consumer. The two companies were compete. I mean, you go back during the Michael Eisner years, excuse me, he was president of Paramount when he came over to be CEO of Disney, and there are rumors that he kind of borrowed the idea of Universal Studios, and he knew that Universal Studios was going to open up a park in Florida, and so he rushed opening of what was then MGM Studios, what's now called Disney Hollywood Studios. And however, there's also stories that Universal definitely used ideas of Disney for building Universal Studios Florida. And so, um, but in the end, those two companies in their theme parks, they do try to outdo each other. But what that does is it makes a better experience for the consumer. I mean, you look at when they were competing over the theme park rights to Universal. I'm sorry, the theme park rights to Harry Potter, and
Mhm.
Universal won those. Well, that ultimately led to Disney opening up, rebranding and opening up Cars Land in California, and they built Pandora in Florida, and it led to several new advancements within the Disney parks. Now you have Universal; they're going on this massive, like, I mean, approach to outdo Disney. That they open Universal Epic Universe.
Mhm.
They're opening, the regional parks, like the one that's for more for children is opening this summer in Frisco. I haven't heard any more details on the one that's supposed to open in Vegas. However, because of that, now Disney they kind of introduced this, 10-year plan for how they are improving the Disney parks. And so ultimately, what it does is it makes for a better experience for the consumer, which is overall a good thing. Now, at the corporate level, Disney, is the Walt Disney Company. Universal Studios is owned by um, Comcast.
Mhm.
At the corporate level, I'm not sure you're getting better product because of the rivalry. They are
Mhm.
just trying to outdo each other. And I'm not sure it's really leading to better products, because part of the competition and part of like a rivalry relationship is resources.
Mhm.
And we've seen both Disney and Universal over the last 5 or 6 years struggle with, putting in a lot of resources, spending a lot of resources on something, and then having to back down on having to back away from a lot of the content that they've produced. And so everybody knows also, um, my dog is a 10-month-old puppy, and she's trying to chew everything. Like all of these baseballs and softballs that I have, so when I'm talking about rivalry and I keep looking away and I keep making sudden movements, I'm almost having like a rivalry with my dog right now. Just so everyone knows. But so
I'm
I,
right behind
it,
you. Ours is about to turn 7 months.
oh, there you go. Um, the, so I think for theme parks, it's really, really good. For the corporate level, I'm not really sure. We'll see in the future. I mean, you remember Comcast came in with a late bid to try and basically run up the buying price Disney paid for Fox,
Hmm.
for the Fox properties that they got. And they did that so that they could try to get Disney to spend as much money as possible. Um, and try to use those resources for later, or try to use the fact that Disney had to spend so much on Fox that they weren't going to be able to compete with Universal, or I'm sorry, with Comcast in the future on future acquisitions.
Hmm.
So, in some instances, the theme parks, I think the rivalry is good. It leads to better products. In other instances, I'm not sure it really does, because part of a rivalry is also managing your resources. And as we saw, especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of companies had to really take a step back on the resources that they were using, and how much money they were
Hmm.
spending. And that really did hurt a lot of the consumer products, and the quality of consumer products that we get.
I got one more for you before we go. And this one's a little bit of a loaded question because, I mean, honestly, things are changing so quickly at this moment in 2026 right now. But what do you think the future, maybe in the next decade, even if you want to put a time frame on it, what do you think rivalry is going to look like in the future?
Within within sport, um, I think rivalry still stays around for the fans that are heavily attached to a team.
Hmm.
By that, I mean, if you grew up in a city your whole life, you've lived in a city your whole life that has a professional team, then your identity is stronger with that favorite team or that group, than somebody who maybe is a transplant or has lived a few different places, in their life, and they followed a few different professional teams. And therefore, because your identity is stronger with that team, then your kind of perception of the rival team is stronger, than that person who doesn't have as strong an identity with a favorite team. If you, for somebody when they're in college, because you're there for, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, however long you're there, and if you're a captive audience to kind of be engulfed and engaged in that culture, well, you have a stronger fandom of that team and those
Hmm.
teams, and you also have stronger perceptions of the rival team because of that, or the rival school because of that. What's interesting is especially within sport, because like before we started talking about, or before we started recording, we were talking about how expensive it is to go to theme parks now.
Hmm.
That's the same thing that's happening within sport. It's so expensive for people to go to sporting events that it is really, it really is a burden on people to try to afford to do things like that. Like one of my great, kind of one of the things I wish were different is, when I was growing up as a kid, we lived an hour north of Houston, Texas,
Hmm.
and we would go to the Astrodome to watch the Houston Astros play a lot, because kids tickets were $1.
Hmm.
Adult tickets were $3. It was open seating, first come, first serve in the outfield. And so we would get there an hour, sometimes 2 hours before a game, and you could watch the players warm up, and they would throw baseballs to you. They would play catch with you in the stands. My kids will never have that relationship with baseball that I had, because now when you go, it's so expensive, and if you want to sit close to the field, it's very, very expensive.
Hmm.
Um, that they'll never have that experience, and that's sad for live sports, to be able to want to go somewhere and not be able to afford it. It's happening in with your streaming services now as well. I mean, it's
Hmm.
really hard to watch. If you are a fan of a specific NFL team, you now have to have 5 or 6 different streaming services to watch that NFL team. Um, I have MLB.TV because a few years ago I got back into watching the Los Angeles Dodgers. Um, they were the first team I ever played on in my, like, when I was in T-ball or whatever, for my like small town. And So like, I've kind of always been a fan of them, but then a couple years ago, my sons were playing on the Dodgers in their rec league, and they actually ended up winning the league. And that year, we watched the real Dodgers play, and that's the first year they won the World Series. And so I was telling the boys, like, "Hey, how cool is that? Like, you won your league, they won their league. That's really cool." And so, like, I've kept watching them. Um, I've never been to a game, but I through MLB.TV I watch. However, when they're playing like the Cincinnati Reds, the St. Louis Cardinals, the Atlanta Braves, when they're playing any of those teams, I can't watch because we're blacked out because we're in those television markets. And so things like
Mm.
that, it's becoming more difficult for people to watch sports live, like in person, but then also like on television or streaming. And I think that's going to affect the way that people engage with the product. And it's going to, and rivalry ultimately is if it's done well and it's done in a healthy environment, not negatively, it helps to promote a product. It builds excitement around a product. And I think with how expensive things are, with things like in college athletics, with things like or conference realignment,
Hmm.
and with NIL money, and now that athletes have revenue sharing, which I think they should, and I think NIL, if done properly, is a good thing. But I think it ultimately can lead to people becoming more disengaged with the product. If we look beyond sport, you look at the if you look at movies and going to a movie theater, I think people definitely will go to certain movies, and they'll go to like the larger tentpole movies, and they'll go to the movies that are good. However, it's not like it used to be where if you wanted to see a movie, you had to go see it in the theater, or else you were waiting 6 to 12 months sometimes to see that in your home. Like now you can just wait a few months and see it on the streaming service. I mean, we saw that with Disney made that mistake with Pixar where they released three Pixar movies in a row to Disney Plus, not even behind a paywall, and then they were surprised that when they released Lightyear in the movie theater that people didn't go is because people were just waiting for it to come on to Disney Plus, and then it took a while to for people to kind of get back. And it was really Elemental that is the movie that kind of brought people back and showed that, oh, hey, this has a longer run than in the movie theaters. Then so maybe we want to go back to the movie theaters to see Pixar. Um, I think in some instances the corporate rivalry and the competitions, they may they're not necessarily helping in those regards.
Hmm.
Because as I said before, like part of it is managing your resources.
Hmm.
And I think now in a world where people are used to seeing AI and they're used to seeing CGI and all of these different things, all these different technological advances, people are becoming more critical observers of what entertainment is. And so when you have companies that they are as part of their competition with others, as part of their rivalry with others, they're trying to control their resources. Well, they're that is affecting the quality of product that they're putting out, and
Hmm.
I think that possibly will hurt people or hurt the way people engage with something.
Hmm.
And then it's the same thing with theme parks. Theme parks, as I said, they're becoming more and more expensive. Um, it's becoming a luxury brand. So will it become, will a rivalry between a Disney fan and a Universal fan, or Disney parks and Universal parks? And by the way, as I said, like they
Hmm.
have more positive views of each other. It's not like they're at each other's throats. But will that competition between Disney and Universal, will it be replaced by people who just are able to go to theme parks and people who aren't able to go to theme parks?
Hmm.
Like Disney and Universal they didn't create the caste system, but it definitely is a different experience when you can go and you can afford to go to the parks when you can't, or when you can afford to get like the premier access when other people
Mhm.
can't, like you have a different experience at the parks. And so maybe those relationships will be replaced by people who just can't afford to go versus people who can afford to go. And
You,
so we're kind of in an interesting situation where within the next 5 to 10 years, everything what I'm saying could come true, but also like everything could have changed so much that it doesn't really mean as much as it does in the future, you know?
yeah, I'll just leave one comment right there. We're recording this at the beginning of summer, and the film Mandalorian and Grogu just came out. Well, my partner and I went to go see it last weekend. We saw it in IMAX, and just for the two of us for tickets, and this was a like 1 in the afternoon showing. It wasn't even like in the evening or anything because those are more expensive. Two tickets, 1 o'clock in the afternoon for a showing of Mando and Grogu were more than $50.
Yeah.
And then we got, obviously this was our choice, but we got the food on top of it, and that's another $30. Just the two of us. And then, you and I were talking before we started, add a family on top of that, and now we're talking out definitely out budgeting yourself. Um, However, I think that is a conversation for another time because we're about to open Pandora's box with that one.
Yeah.
I, though, last season stole a page out of your book, my friend, and I added in some rapid fire questions at the end. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to hit you with a few rapid fire questions before we close out
Perfect.
today. All right.
Perfect.
Are you
I'm
ready?
gonna
Roller
Yeah, and
coasters or dark rides?
my dog is gonna join me so she's not roaming around the room. This is Remy, by the way.
Hello,
Named
Remy.
named after either the rat from Ratatouille or, as I like to call her, Remy LeBeau, Gambit from Marvel.
Yes,
So, all right, go ahead.
X-Men.
We're ready.
All right. Roller coasters or dark rides?
I think dark rides.
I would say
And
too.
and whenever there's a mixture of them, that's really really cool. Whenever you have a roller coaster that has like a dark ride element, that's really really fun.
Like
So,
a Hagrid's or like a Guardians of the Galaxy or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. I mean, that's the coolest roller coaster I've
Hmm.
been on because it really does. The first time I rode it, I told my boys, I said, this is exactly how I imagined it feeling like if you were actually in their plane, if you were
Absolutely.
flying around in space. It's really, really cool.
Would you rather attend a major championship game or the opening of a brand new park?
Um, Probably an opening of a brand new park, especially now, because one, it's so expensive to do major championship games. Um, and what's interesting is this is going to seem a little bit contradictory, but as I get older, I'm not a huge fan of major crowds,
Hmm.
which would be at both. And you're thinking, well, if you're opening a new park, there's a lot of crowd there. I mean, look at what happened with Disneyland open. But I think there's more space to walk around.
Yeah,
And I'm also at the age where I like to try to enjoy things less for going on rides and going on the attractions, just kind of looking around and walking around and doing those types of things. So
hmm,
I think like a theme park or a new park would be better. And it's also, if you look at it from a cost perspective, if you're paying $150 to go to a theme park, but it's open for 12 hours,
mm.
well, the cost per hour is a lot lower than if you're paying $150 to go to a 2.5 hour basketball or baseball game, you know?
That is a great perspective. College sports or professional sports?
Um, College sports in most instances. The
All
the
right.
the one professional sport that I really enjoy watching is baseball. I like watching baseball. Other professional sports, not as much, but the reason I like watching baseball is because there are so many games. I think it's a great lesson for just kind of life in general. That one you can watch a game intent with intent, or it can be on in the background, and I think that's pretty cool. But two, like for a life lesson, and for what I tell the boys on the teams that I coach, is let's face it, not every day is going to be the most exciting day of your life. Some days are just going to be kind of, some of them are going to be boring, some of them are going to
Hmm.
be just normal, and then you're going to have exciting days here and there. That's kind of what a baseball game is, and that's what a baseball season is, because you play
Hmm.
162 games in Major League Baseball. It's like if you have a bad game or if you have a bad 4 or 5 games in a row, it's not that big of a deal. There's a great quote from Major League, from the movie Major League, where Jake Taylor tells the young Ricky Vaughn, like, "Hey, some paraphrasing, hey, we got 161 more of these to go. Like, don't get overly excited, you know."
Yeah. All right. This one may again open some doors, but I'm going to ask it. Walt Disney World or Universal Studios Florida?
Walt Disney World. Um,
Yes.
I have, I haven't been to Universal Studios Florida in a while, and my boys have started to talk about, like, hey, we want to watch the Harry Potter movies, and maybe we want to go to the parks. And like, we're like, you got to read the books first. And they're like, why do we have to read the books? Like those books. And I'm like, hey, look, if you don't read the books, that means every time we go, we're going to Walt Disney World, which is fine with me.
Hmm.
Um, Now, I don't know if this is a question or not, but I have one for you. And if I
Okay.
steal one from you, I apologize.
No, no, no. Go for it.
Walt Disney World or Disneyland?
I've
Because
answered
my
this.
view has
Yes.
changed. My view has
Um,
changed.
See, now so I'm a Disney Worlder, and I will tell you why. I do love Disneyland, don't get me wrong. I love it. The nostalgia, the feeling, the magical feeling that's in it, the originality of it, Walt's original apartment. Like I love that nostalgia feeling. I just like Walt Disney World because it has more. And you don't
Mhm.
get that magical feeling until you're literally all the way inside Disneyland. When you're pulling up to Disneyland and the Denny's is across the street, it kills the magic for me.
Yeah. So I grew up going to Walt Disney World. And I've only been to Disneyland twice. The first time was in summer 2023. We
Hmm.
stayed off property, and I was struck by how cool it was that it's so accessible,
Hmm.
especially with kids. It's like, hey, you go through security, Disneyland's to the right, California Adventures to the left, Disney Springs is in front of you. That's pretty cool. This last year that we went, we actually were fortunate enough because we had like airplane miles and things like that and credit card points, that we um, we paid for our air travel through credit card points. And I have a Disney card, so I a lot probably 80-85% of the tickets were paid for off of that.
Hmm.
So the money that we budgeted for the trip, I was like, well, it's this is what we kind of budgeted. Let's just go ahead and stay at the Disneyland Hotel, because they were running a pretty good promotion then. Um, and we stayed at the Disneyland Hotel. And we actually, like, my wife and I talked about, do we want to stay there? Or do we want to stay at the Grand Californian? And it's like, look, while the boys are a certain age, let's stay at the Disneyland Hotel. It's like the more quote unquote magical, you know?
Hmm.
And it is one of the best vacation and theme park experiences I have had, because we flew into Long Beach Airport, which if anyone ever gets a chance to fly into Long Beach Airport, it is amazing. I mean, it's outdoors. Like, there's actually, you when you land, you go down, you walk off stairs, and walk on the tarmac into the buildings. The buildings there's like 4 or 5 different buildings. There's actually one gate with a waiting area that is outside. Like, it's not
Wow.
like covered. It's so cool. And it's like the old, what you think of from like the movies you watch from like the 40s and
Like,
50s.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
how it looks. And
The Pan Am days
and
and yeah, yeah.
yeah, and we took an Uber from there to the Disneyland Hotel, and it's just, I mean, you're there at the Disneyland Hotel. I got to go to, Trader Sam's. We got to do the monorail slides, although it was very cold, so we only did them one time in the swimming pool. And then like you have like kind of your entrance into Disney Springs, and then you're right there.
Hmm.
And so I still really enjoy Walt Disney World. And every November I try to go because there's a conference that I go to. And when I go, I'll try to do a day or two in the park so I can kind of get that experience. And it helps with the classes, it helps with the podcast and research and things like that. Um, but I think if I like right now, if I was choosing like, hey, here's a week, are we gonna go to Walt Disney World? Are we gonna go to Disneyland? I think I'm picking Disneyland. If it's other than like uh, being expensive to fly out there, it's
Hmm.
actually it's actually in some way, in many ways cheaper to do
Yeah.
Disneyland other than the flights than it is Walt Disney World,
Hmm.
which is really also that's really really interesting to me that that
Yeah.
happens.
Well, my friend, we are at our time. And as always, I loved our conversation that we had today. I thought it was phenomenal. And I thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me today.
Yes, thank you. And guess what? Now Remy is tuckered out. So she's now asleep. So now we could talk for
You
like
want to
two
do
more
another
hours and
episode?
she's
Yeah,
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 she's just gonna lay there now. So what other ideas do you have? No, it was
yeah.
great. It was great being on. Thanks, Alan. I really, really enjoy this.
All right, my friends. Next episode, what are we talking? Oh, nostalgia. Nostalgia is a good one. We touched on it a little bit today. I'm going to have um, author Slater Hamilton, who writes about his passion and fandoms of fantasy and all that fun stuff. So that's going to be really fun. Join us on the next episode. And as my pal Mickey Mouse says, we'll see y'all real soon.